In this episode, a relay network gets built around the moon, Colonel Lagerfurt figures out something about jet engines and electrical generation, and a solar storm hits the crew of the Kerpollo 5. All of this and more is coming up right now. Okay, so I'm back here with the Weasley Mark II, and I'm still confused on this whole why this here. If I configure the atmospheric science, so according to this uses 2.8 units of electricity. It has 38 megabytes to store with. Now, what's confused with is if I click on here, this is the antenna down here at the bottom, the Communitron 16S. There is a button here that says to simulate transmitting in planar. And so if I click that, what that just did is it added that onto the total electricity being consumed. So according to Kerbalism, this is a little menu Kerbalism provides in the spaceplane hangar and the VAB, this is now consuming 2.883 units of electricity per second. Most of that is from when this wing experiment is running. And that is actually correct, because if I go up here and take a look at the Communitron, it says that while it's transmitting, it only uses 0.03 per second, not the 20 per second that I mentioned last episode. I was looking at the stock parts on the KSP wiki. It says there that the antennas use 20 units of electricity per second in the stock game, and obviously Kerbalism must nerf that, which makes complete sense because trying to cover 20 units of electric charge per second while transmitting is a bit crazy when transmission's measured in minutes, not seconds. So this number's right. We're using 2.883 units of electricity per second, but if we take a look at the Weasley jet engine, it generates 4.4 per second, 4.0 units of electric charge per second. So this single Weasley should cover this. So I'm actually really confused why I'm running. I think I need to fly this again and really pay attention to what's going on with electricity. So I put this all back together again. I've also upped the storage capacity, so this cockpit can now hold 40 megabytes of data, and this experiment generates 38 megabytes of data. So a single experiment should be able to hold, or this hard drive should be able to hold a single experiment. I think I need to just get up, pay attention, turn the antenna on and off, and do a little bit of experiment. By the way, there is a second experiment I can do now with the atmospheric variometer called the Cloud Experiment, the Cumulative Longitudinal Overland Understanding of Dynamic what? That's the end of that. Many Kerbals ask. So, this has to be done, though, in the high atmosphere. Biome specific once again, so lots of science that's capable of being collected. The proviso, though, that I didn't notice is that you do need a level 3 pilot for this experiment to work, which I don't have. The Panther plane that we saw last episode is certainly capable of getting itself and flying around in the hot upper part of the atmosphere. But, like I said, I need a level 3 pilot, so that's going to have to be for the future, for the here and now. So we're going to save our edits. And this is going to take 4 days? Really? 4 days? I guess it's going to take 4 days. Alright, fine, be that way. Okay, so we're going to go into VAB. I got to test some things here. I think what I'll do is just get myself into simulation mode. Test fly, test launch them all. Starting with the Kerpollo 5. And I won't show you all of these, but I am a little, even though this is very similar to Kerpollo 4, it's almost identical, but I've been playing around a lot with my launch script in sandbox mode, and I'm just not convinced these things are still going to keep flying for me. So maybe this thing will fly fine, I don't know, we're going to find out. It's best to make sure before I fly it for realsies on its way to Minmus. I've been doing so much playing around with that launch script, I'm starting to lose track of the slight iterations that are going on. So this goes full thrust. Oh, you know, No, I think I'm still back on my same trajectory. I was playing with also the trajectory, getting it to see if it'll go a little bit steeper. But I'm back down to the old trajectory. Lots of parameters to play with, like, you know, how much do you exactly nerf the thrust in the upper atmosphere? So right now, yeah, it's limiting the thrust to weight ratio to just 0.9, and it's just keeping it at that. What I was playing with is adjusting the thrust so that it would keep the time to apoapsis between 30 and 40 seconds. And actually, I got that piece of it working pretty well, but then I had to play with the ascent trajectory. I think I needed to make it a little bit more steep. It also got into some confusion because sometimes there was confusion with staging and staging the fairings. That had to be sorted out. And there's also there's so many parameters to play with. And I think one of the biggest issues too is that these rockets are all designed to fly under my old launch script, and I have to think about redesigning them. So I was trying to make a kind of a fit all type of launch script that fits every kind of wacky rocket I've ever built, and yeah, it was getting too complicated, so I'm back to an old favorite here. So it's now locked itself to prograde. Yep, that's still the same. I think it did that at 40 kilometers. That seems to work well. And yep, stages the fairing at 50 kilometers, which is a little earlier than when I used to stage the fairing. The reason being is that because used to be I would be done with my, you know, my apoapsis would have been at up to 80 kilometers by now. So it was not under thrust. So if you're not under thrust, you're better off just keeping the mass and keeping that better aerodynamic shape right through to the end. But now that it's still under thrust, you're better off losing the mass. I figure 50 kilometers, the air is thin enough that, but that's based on nothing other than my own guess. Either way, everything seems to be going fine, but I won't know for sure until this thing has left the atmosphere. I've got 114 meters per second left in the booster. There's 40 meter per second burn to finish off the circularization, so this is going to work fine. So I should not be paranoid. What's my inclination is at a nice number too, so you know what? This is good. Let's end the simulation. So that test launch proved to be unnecessary, but does make me feel better. On to the next one. So this is a set of 3 relays to go to the moon. I already have relays around Minmus. I've actually had them for quite a while. I just never got around to doing it around the moon. This is virtually the same vehicle and relay satellites. They're almost identical. The only thing I did was slightly tweak some of the fuel levels when it came to the transfer vehicle and the levels of fuel that are in each individual satellite, because the insertion plan is a tad different than it would be around Minmus. But other than that, it's the same vessel, exactly, right down to the booster. So this is a very old vessel. And, oh, look at that! What happened there? That's spectacular. Okay. Let's... Oh! And the... Wow, that was a nice test of the abort system. Except that booster, of course, I can't... The abort system should really... It should stage that, shouldn't it? I wonder if I can... Okay, just put it on. Lock! Where's lock? Can it lock it? There's locked, okay. It should take this... Oh, I guess I could have staged it. Decouple. Nice. Okay, that was spectacularly fun. All right, that's gonna crash. Okay, let's end the simulation. I'm not sure what happened there. That was pretty fun. But my abort system worked. It detected the loss of control and it aborted. If there were Kerbals in there, it would have activated a launch escape system since there were no Kerbals in there. So let's terminate this simulation, go back to the vehicle assembly building, try and figure out what happened. And the problem was resolved with just a tweaking of the boosters. In particular, the Separatrons were the cause of that. So yeah, the abort system, that was something I was working on with my... Because what was happening is I was playing around with my launch script. I was finding sometimes I was getting these high altitude aborts. when it shouldn't be doing a high altitude abort. And I realized what the reason was. The reason was is at 40 kilometers it locks the prograde, but it's looking from deviations from a set course, and it was looking at still the course that's in a formula that I have for calculating what pitch it should have at any particular altitude, which it abandoned. So of course it's going to deviate from that. So I actually, once it's above 40 kilometers, it looks at, is it deviating from prograde by more than 10 degrees, and then it calls it abort. So there's actually 3 different abort phases there. I'm not sure what went wrong. There are 3 different abort phases. Abort phase number 1 is right on the launch pad. If it detects that not all those engines that should be firing fired, it does an abort, because you can get engine misfires right at launch. And then during this phase, until it gets to 40 kilometers, what it's looking for is a deviation from my profile formula of more than 10 degrees, and if it notices that, it calls an abort. And once it's past 40 kilometers, if it notices that it's more than 10 degrees off from prograde, it calls the abort. So it's actually looking at different things. And a little bit off course there, but I don't know why there. We've just nerfed thrust. It reacts differently too. If it's in below 25 kilometers and an abort is called, it will activate if there is a launch escape system, if there's Kerbonauts aboard. But if it's above, I think it's 25 kilometers, maybe it's 40 kilometers, I don't know, and it notices an abort, it simply just shuts off. It does its best to shut off engines. Hopefully it doesn't have SRBs going like it did last time. Because if you're up like an altitude like right now and suddenly there's an engine failure or something like that, you know, you're not hitting the ground in a while, so you have time to sort of think about, you know, well, maybe I can stage and maybe I still got fuel to make orbit. I don't know, right? Did I see something break off there, or was that just... I did, I lost an antenna. Son of a beach! Yeah, see that? There's 2 of these, 2 of these, 2 of these. This one has just 1. Oh my golly. Annoyances. Trying to figure out how to get that not to happen too. This is why you simulate. So objectives this episode. We've got lots of things that have been built during this time period while we are time warping to our Duna correction last episode. And this is again going to be a big time jump episode. And what I'm particularly looking at is this Kerbin to Eve to Joule. So this is a plan in place. We'll see how it works. I know my Kerbin to Eve to Moho didn't seem to set up as well as I had hoped. Well, I botched that a little bit, didn't I? But Kerbin to Eve to Joule, 53 days for this launch window. Obviously, what I want to do is build something that's capable of doing that. I still haven't built that yet. But before I can build that, I need to have better antennas. And the antennas I need, because we're going all the way out to Joule, can be found in this section, electronics. Okay, I need these antennas, the Communitron HG61, and as you can see, that costs 300 science. But in order to get that, if we follow this line backwards, I also need to have advanced electrics, which is 160. So what I need is 460 science to be able to unlock electrics, and whatever other goodies come along with that. There's probably lots of other goodies I don't get, but it's really about those antennas. So my goal this episode is to raise up that 460 science, and that begins now. Well, this ought to look familiar. This is only the 3rd time you've seen this launch in less than 15 minutes. Again, these are Minmus, not Minmus relays. They were Minmus relays. These are the Mun Relays. They're on their way to the moon. And you might be saying, wait. This isn't science. You're right, there is no science on this, but I do have a radiation scanner ready for launch, and I thought, you know, it would be just great if I kept I could prevent it from losing signals every time it went to the far side of the moon. So I thought, I have these relays, I've had them for a long time, why don't I send them up? I could have built an entirely new lifter for it, but I got lazy. I got an old one that works, why not just stick with it? Okay, and yeah, at 50 kilometers we should be staging the fairings. Last time we lost an antenna. There we go. I don't see antennas breaking away. That when I turned down the force on that, and that seemed to work a lot better. Yep. This one antenna is just too close to the base of the fairing, I think, is why that happened. But everything seems ducky now. That is until the final orbital insertion. I don't know. We're well past apoapsis. This isn't going to be pretty, I can see that. Alright, that did not go great. No, it did not. Let's put it on prograde. Yeah, how did that botch that so badly? Still things that aren't right. Okay, that's... Alright, that is one ugly orbit. Whatever, it's what we got. Okay, see, still a work in progress. This came out really crappy, but life is full of disappointment. I think it doesn't do a good insertion when it really has to nerf the thrust. When it really nerfs the thrust on that main engine. So that's what I gotta look at. There's something wrong in the calculations there. If it has an engine that it's operating at pretty close to full thrust when it does the circularization, it seems to do fine. But when it has an engine that it's going to... that it reduces the thrust to weight ratio on it a lot, then it doesn't do fine. Whatever, it's all gonna work. So this is going to be a phasing orbit. So we're not circularizing here. Instead, we're putting ourselves into an orbit that'll have a period of 4 hours. The eventual orbit for the satellites, I want to have a period of 3 hours. So it's 1/3 off, which is the whole plan on how you do this. So that as we go around the phasing orbit, each time around, we will drop another satellite, and because I am 1/3 off of the eventual period that I want, each of those satellites should be 1/3 of an orbit different from each other. And this is pretty close to circular, so I know that's not right. I want that apoapsis to be 621.5 kilometers or in about, and again, it's not so much about getting these numbers exactly right as it is about getting the period right. Unfortunately, I won't know what the period is until I'm like actually in the situation. As it gets ready to do this burn, what I'm really looking at here is this orbital period, which right now says infinities. But need it to be 4 hours, I believe, is what we're shooting for. Okay. See how it does. It's unlikely to be, but we'll tweak it once we're done the burn. Okay, we do have a capture. 5 hours. Not bad. 8 seconds off. Close that. So we're going to tweak this like super low. I keep forgetting you can put in just raw numbers here. I'm going to go actually 0.5. There we go. That's as low as that'll ever go. Alright. We need to point this around prograde. And just increase our period. Oh no, that'll decrease our period. Right? Prograde? No. Prograde will increase our period. Oh my god. Rockhead, come on. Just gonna burn prograde and give a couple of little puffs. Okay, 8, 9. Okay, that's 0.8 of a second off. I think I can probably deal with that. So let's put this thrust back. Let's see. Put this back up. Now, we're going to be dropping a satellite at Apoapsis. Was that a lot of force? I can't tell if that was a lot of force. But whatever. Alright, so what we are doing... Oh, that wasn't a lot of force. So good, I must have turned that right down in the VAB. Alright, so what we are doing is we just need to circularize. Now this thing has only got monopropellant in it in this tiny little can up here at the top. 1.5 units of monopropellant, but that should be fine. It is being propelled by a single linear RCS port. That's how you build them cheap and light, folks. We just need to get ourselves towards Apoapsis here. Oh, wait. I am doing this completely wrong. You melonhead. We don't want to circularize at Apoapsis. We want to circularize at Periapsis. Alright. Well, you know, honestly, no harm's been done. Well, that gives us time to launch the Kerpollo 5. And we're off! Kerpollo 5. Jebediah and Bill, who got to know each other very, very well with their many, many days on Kerbal Station. And our rookie scientist, Hadas, who has never been in space before and clearly is not enjoying this ride. Oh, and we do have some contracts. We're on our way to Minmus. Let's get this set up. Oh, we've got 3 contracts here. One is to plant a flag on Minmus. We've done it before, but it came up again. One is to collect greenstone back from, or green sandstone. I never really did understand that before, how that's supposed to work, but I actually was playing a little bit in 1.91 with stock and realized that there's just scattered stones. You just need to get a Kerbal and a little animation. He pulls out a pickaxe and, you know, Bob's your uncle, you got the stone. So we'll go around looking for the stone, and then finally I have this contract, which I had with Kerpollo 4 as well, to gather surface deployed mystery goo observations. I think I had the wrong equipment aboard. I thought it was the stock deployable equipment that I needed, but I think I got the right stuff, but we'll talk about it once we get ourselves to Minmus. Again, very minor modifications between this and the Kerpollo 4. Lifters identical. I think the only thing I did was switch out those cans. Oh, and of course, tons of nitrogen. It now has so much nitrogen. It says I have 50 EVAs available, but I know that every EVA, every time you go in and go out, or out and in, I guess you'd have to go out first, but every time you open that hatch, this goes down by 3. There's lots of ways, I think, to improve upon that. You know what I'd love is, and then, again, this was suggested by a viewer, not by me, but to have just a toggle in here to say depressurize. And then you depressurize this cabin. This goes down by 3 if they think that that's fair, but then you keep it depressurized while everybody gets out, because you wouldn't repressurize. At least I wouldn't think so. And then if, you know, you can't open the hatch unless it is depressurized, which would be true. You always see those films where, you know, somebody opens the hatch. Those hatches will not open if it's pressure inside the vessel. There's no way, because they open inwards, not outwards. But you know, if you just had a button that said depressurize, if you tried the EVA without depressurizing, just a little message comes up saying, hey, you want to depressurize first? And you go, yeah, sure, of course. So it wouldn't be that complicated, I think, from at least a gaming standpoint. I don't know what it would be at all from a coding standpoint. But then you have control over how you use up your nitrogen a lot more than just simply every time you bring someone in and out. Because what I don't like is now I'm kind of tempted just... I like to get everybody out, but if everybody, you know, if that's going to cost me nitrogen every time I put somebody on the surface, I kind of don't want to do it. We're not in space yet. Let's get ourselves in space. I also think I am understanding why the circularization part of this script is not working so well. There we go. Because I think you know, stock thinks that I'm going to go at full thrust and this is going to take 1 second to go. Of course, I've got the thrust artificially nerfed, but I actually think my calculation for the burn time, here, let's time warp again, I'll let it get on the node. My calculation for the burn time that the script is doing is actually based on that these engines can go full thrust. I don't think I'm taking into account the fact that I'm limiting the thrust. So it's starting the burn way too late than it should. It's starting it when the game thinks I should start it, but that's really too late because it's not going to do anywhere near full thrust. That's what I think is happening. And that kind of coincides with the fact that if I have a lifter that is going to do the burn at pretty close to full thrust on the engines, like these engines are, there's a lot of thrust there if I went to full thrust. If it was going to go to full thrust, see, here we go, 30 seconds, 30 seconds. See, this it's going to start the burn at exactly the time it would start the burn if these engines were full thrust. See, watch this. This is 20 seconds, and then up here 20 seconds. But it shouldn't. It should have started the burn actually probably already by now. So that's why it's doing these really crappy insertions, but that should be an easy fix. Yeah, it's starting it right on time when it should have started already. See, because look how low the thrust is. Are you kidding me? Oh man, it botched that, didn't it? Okay, burn's complete. No, it's not. Let's get this. We're not even out of the atmosphere. Alright, we fit it. It's close. That's close enough. And we'll aim for a polar orbit about Minmus. And while we're on our way out there, why don't we get back to the moon? Whoa, hello. How's an orbital mechanics fun? Came back for a visit. Okay. Yeah, hopefully that won't pose... Well, it didn't hit us, so... Yeah, goodbye. Okay. Alright, let's put this on retrograde. That's going to burn us away. And what we need to do is bring down our apoapsis. RCS needs to be on because it is a monoprop engine. Let's just go. Wait a little bit. And the main thing again is to get our period down, and we want to get our period down to 3 hours, as darn close as we can get it to that. Oh, that's freaking close enough. 0.2 of a second off. Not even 2/200ths of a second off. But with that accomplished, it was time to go back to our transfer vehicle and ride around the periapsis once again. This is our first relay. Oh, I really need to rename that, don't I? So I'll rename that Mun Relay number 1. These are the rest of our Mun Relays, have the exact same name. But because this is now in a 3-hour orbit and this one is in a 4-hour orbit as they go around, this one is now 1 hour ahead of this one when we get back to periapsis anyways, which of course translates into exactly 1/3 of an orbit. So we'll drop another relay here, and then the main ship will go around one more time. That's how you get them so that they're all nicely equal spaced from each other. And by the way, as far as the altitude of this orbit goes, and why I picked the 377.35, I actually have a whole video on why that number for these relays that you are free to take a look at if you want to get into the math of all of this kind of stuff. But right now, our network is now complete. I wonder if we can calm down with the number lines. Yeah, whatever. You can see it with what I want, but I gotta get rid of you. Sorry, buddy. But instead of showing you that, why don't we cut to the Weasley where Colonel Lagerfurt and I are just figuring out something when it comes to electrical generation and jet engines. Alternator output right now is 1.28 electric charge per second. Now as I turn this up, maybe what it says in the VAB isn't quite right. Okay, it's 1.9 electric charge per second. 9.95 electric charge per second. Okay, we'll just let it climb slowly. That seems to be leveling off. Maybe as the air gets thinner, yeah, it does seem as this thrust goes down, this electric charge per second goes down. So that might be part of why this is happening. Okay, let's start the wing experiment. And it's running, and I can tell I'm using up electricity. So it's using more electricity. Let's not transmit. Let's see what that does. Still use. So it's not the transmission that's the problem. It's the wing experiment itself. Now, what if I came lower? Really picked up speed here. Because I think as the air gets thinner, this alternator output isn't what it says it is in the VAB. Oh, I also notice I have a thrust limiter on, so let's deal with that too. It's close now, but that's what it is. I think I was taking a look at what the Weasley's supposed to generate in the VAB, but I think that's really ideal conditions. You know, sea level and going max speed, getting the maximum amount of thrust out of it. And just flying like this, I actually was able to finish off the water biome for this wing experiment and went back and finished off the shores. But flying around at top speed all the time, especially over sometimes small biomes, really didn't make sense. And then it occurred to me, of course, the way to fix all this is just to put on enough batteries that you're not going to run out of electricity while you're transmitting. And that turned out to be, well, 6 of these 400 electrical unit batteries. Just pop those on the back of the plane. Now this plane looks like it's ready for science. And now without the need to keep full thrust all the time. It's pretty simple just to do circles over whatever biome that you're interested in. My first target being the grasslands that's just to the west of the KSC. And then once that was done, I headed off to the nearby highlands. And it was while I was doing circles over the highlands I realized a couple of things. Number one was, wow, this is going to take a long time, and because of hard drive space. One of these wing experiments comes pretty close to filling up the hard drive, which means you need to fly around to transmit away all of that science that you just collected. That takes some time, and then you got to fly around and recharge the batteries, and that's going to take some time, and all of that time can be saved by simply flying right back to the runway, landing. It only takes a few minutes to roll over the plane and get it to fly once again. So yeah, it was way easier just to come back and then come back and do the highlands. And then the other thing I realized was, as I was close to the mountains are going to be sketchy using this technique, because you have to stay below 6 kilometers of altitude, and that is not really that different from how high those highest peaks are on the mountains. But you know what I'm thinking? Some sort of hovermobile might work. I kind of did have a VTOL way in the past. I also have been playing with helicopters in the stock game and actually getting them to kind of work for me. One of those two options, I don't know if the helicopters will work at a high altitude, but one of those two options might just work for this mountain biome. But anyway, that's all going to have to be for the future. I started running out of pilots, so I had to actually wait for a pilot to become available before I started to fly this once again. It was while I was time warping that, well, another issue reared its head. Our observation report, coronal mass ejection. I got a mass. Okay. Shoot. What do we got here? Electrical. Coronal mass ejection incoming in 2 minutes. Okay. Alright. My biggest concern are these guys. Okay, and you can actually put shielding on these capsules and stuff. I actually never really bother. Darn you, son! Because it adds weight. But yeah, we're kind of out in the middle of space between Kerb. There's really nowhere for us to go. I'm going to try. Yes, let's try this. I know what I'm going to do. This might do something. I'm kind of curious if it does. See, if you point, I mean, the coronal mass ejection's coming from this direction, without a doubt. So if I point, put my back end towards the sun. Does that look like I got my back end pointed pretty much towards the sun? We'll call it that. And oh, we are in it now. It's going to last for an hour and 24 minutes. We are exposed to a moderate amount of radiation, 0.31 rads per hour. Now, what I'm curious about is if I tilt this so that, does this affect the amount of radiation it does. Look at that. Look at that. Oh, okay, that's enough of that. This works. Okay. So we don't need no shelters. I mean, and this makes sense. It's looking, I'm really impressed. It's looking at the orientation of the vessel. It makes perfect sense because the radiation's obviously coming from that direction, and in order to affect our Kerbals up here, it's got to go through, well, especially all the propellant. I would think that's the biggest roadblock it's got to run through. But that's awesome. The only other Kerbals I have in space are in Kerbin Station. They are safely below the radiation belts. So that's great. We can ride this out. We're fine. Woo! Awesome. Alright. I'm excited about that. Are you guys excited about that? You should be excited about that. That worked great. So we'll just ride this out. We are not being too exposed. Oh, we got a radiation scan from Kerbin space. Somewhere. Somewhere. Did that come from this thing? It could have. That must have come from this thing. I probably have the radiation scan going. I don't care. I got other things going. Oh, of course! Oh my gosh, yes, of course. Science. For science, there's upsides to solar storms. And that is, if we go on radiation scan, I forgot about this. Let's just look at Kerbin here. That one of the situations in which you can collect science in space is during a solar storm. So, for the price of a little bit of radiation, these folks collected 3.6 science for me. Oh, it's just super. Do I have anything around Minmus or anything that was collecting science at that moment? And no. I don't know if it matters. Whatever. That's awesome. No, getting irradiated was never more worth it. All right, let's ride out the rest of this storm. 3.6 radiation scan, space solar storm. I think that was from the sun. One of my probes about the sun has a radiation scan going. I think that was from the sun. Yep, collected its solar storm. 40 science for that one. I don't know which of my interplanetary probes got that first. I guess logically it should be the one on its way to Eve, not the one on its way to Duna, because the one on its way to Eve would have got hit first. That is so excited. Though, to be honest, coronal mass ejections, aren't they localized? Like, if they don't, it's not like it's a sphere that goes out from the sun. It's just a, I don't know, whatever. I'm gonna take it. Okay, I'm still getting distracted. We got 7.5 minutes left. You know, I'm hoping we're okay for electricity with all this. Oh, our electricity is getting pretty low. Okay. We'll ride this out. It's over. It's over. That's the downside of this little trick. Is because my solar panels were completely blocked doing that. And if I ran out of electricity, well then the scrubbers turn off and bad things start to happen. It does take a little while. Are we charging now? We're charging back up. We did get pretty low. But we made it. We're through, and I don't even think they're at 3% of their radiation dosage, which is nothing. Nothing for a Kerbal. Well, that was some unexpected science. I am beginning to knock off that goal of 460 science so I can unlock those antennas. And I haven't even gotten to Minmus yet, which should be a boon. But you know that's going to have to be for the next episode. So I'm going to thank you for watching and hope to see you then.